I have been a licensed speech pathologist since 1989. I work in private practice, excuse me, sorry. I work as a private practitioner as a speech pathologist, but I also work as a clinical consultant to Semantic Compaction Systems. Semantic Compaction Systems is a company that was started by Bruce Baker. He is the gentleman that developed the MinSpeak language system. So if you have any PRC technologies, if you're using Unity or you're using LAMP Words for Life, that's all born out of his brainchild of MinSpeak. And so one of my primary roles at Semantic Compaction Systems is to present the 2.5-day conference every month. And Christina, I hope you get to come next year. It's definitely worth the trip. And I say that because it's Bruce's content and he's just brilliant. So I also work as a per diem therapist for children at a local clinic, and so I have my hands in many things. I've presented across the board on core vocabulary, descriptive teaching, and Bloom's taxonomy, among some other topics, and I'm really excited to share with you today. I'm hoping that as a result of today, you'll be able to talk about the difference between a referential and a descriptive teaching approach. You'll be able to generate descriptive definitions for curriculum vocabulary. You'll be able to provide examples of how to encourage student responses without having to add curriculum vocabulary to your student system. And you'll be able to create activities across the levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And we'll talk towards the end about Bloom's taxonomy for those of you who might not be familiar with what that is. But before we get started, I did get some feedback from Christina from some of you who looked through the PowerPoint already. And so I have adapted it slightly. I took out the hatchet and put in another example, things like that. But I did want to just get some feedback from you. I'm hoping that I'll be able to hear you. What types of AAC technologies are you currently using?
You mean like what? Yeah, NovaChat, LAMP, Touch Chat.
Okay, NovaChat, Touch Chat. You're using LAMP.
LAMP. And we have a GoTalk.
Okay. Is anybody using a manual communication board or like a paper-based system?
In the classroom, we do sometimes.
Okay. So as an augment or an extra support. Okay. Okay, I'm just writing a couple notes so as I refer to things. And then tell me about are you all you're not all together in one classroom, or are you? No, so tell me a little bit about your classrooms, how they're structured and how many kids are in there. And
Average 30, 27.
27 to 30 kids. And did I read that it's
classroom, yeah.
I'm sorry?
In the Gen Ed classroom.
Gen Ed, okay. And so you don't have any self-contained classrooms, correct? Or you're not working in a self-contained format?
We have a self-contained class, but we only do small groups to pull out.
Okay.
But for the most part, we try to push our kids into the Gen Ed classroom.
Perfect. Okay, great. Alrighty, awesome. Well, I know you know how quickly in Gen Ed that the curriculum changes, right? A unit might be a unit for a week or 2 weeks, and then you're moving on to the next unit. And so, you know, I'll give you a little bit of the history of intervention with AAC has been that, you know, the speech pathologist or the paraprofessional or the special education teacher has become a programmer trying to get all of the words in for the next lesson. So if you're talking about, you know, solid, liquid, you know, gas, then those words had to be programmed into the system. I get the impression from the feedback I got from Christina, are you guys doing a lot of this curriculum vocabulary for your students?
Programming devices.
Curriculum vocabulary.
Programming a lot.
For the most part, we don't program.
For the most part, that's. So if the lesson is is a science lesson on the states of matter, then you have to program that vocabulary in? No. Okay. Okay. I apologize. I'm having a hard time hearing you guys back. I'm going to turn my volume up a little bit. So historically, that's what has happened is that in the AAC devices, you'd have a science page and the words would go in, and you'd have a social studies page and the words would go in. So there was a lot of programming going on. I believe, at the expense of language and language development for our kids. So I'm going to cover very quickly what that approach was known as, and then we'll get into descriptive teaching. But traditionally, people were using something that we call a referential teaching method, and that's where the classroom teacher would encourage participation of her students who use AAC by having specific curriculum vocabulary programmed into the device. And then that vocabulary, the teacher would know that the information was in there, and the teacher could ask a question such as, what name is given to the people who lived in America, sorry for the typo, when it was discovered? And then, the student might push the button on his device that says Native Americans. Or tell me a type of housing used by Native Americans, and the student would push another button on his device, then it might say teepee or wigwam or longhouse. And so in the classroom, you're in the gen ed environment, and you hear the dialogue that's going on between teachers and their typically developing students, or their students who are speaking. And you know that they will often ask this type of close-ended question, or this referential type question, to all of the students in the classroom, but they will also ask their typical students a more open-ended question. But they tend not to involve our AAC users using an open-ended style question. And there are a couple reasons why. One is, I think there's this perception that it's more efficient to hit a key and it says a whole sentence, or hit a key and it gives the answer, right? So it's a little quicker in the classroom. If a classroom teacher has given you a list of vocabulary words to program into the system, they know that those words have been programmed, so they know the student can successfully participate. Excuse me. And so that's another reason that they might prefer that strategy. And then the third reason is that teachers might feel that a child doesn't have the language skills necessary to give more than a one-word answer. And typically I delve into this a little bit further, but I'm going to do that a couple slides into it. So for now, I'll leave that at that. But what happens when we're using a referential teaching approach is students have to access what we call temporary words. Caroline Musselwhite, who is a speech pathologist in Arizona who does a lot with AAC, refers to them as words that float down from heaven and then they float back up. And once a unit is completed, we don't necessarily need those words again. So you have taken a lot of time to program vocabulary that might be in their device, or might be used for, let's say, a week or two. But those same words, TP, Native American, we don't use those words every day. So the time that we could be focusing on teaching the concepts and be focused on teaching language, we get focused on the curriculum vocabulary. I'm going to show you, have you guys seen this video yet? No, okay, I'm going to show you this video. This video was developed by Terry Gibson. She is a mom of an augmented communicator in Great Britain. And Bruce Baker, the gentleman that I work with, is a linguist, and he used to travel all over the world talking about the importance of core vocabulary and, kind of talking about the hindrance that we put on our students to learn all this curriculum vocabulary over learning language. And so this mom put this video together. You're going to see a couple of things where the student is asking for things and he's being told no, and that's because there were a lot of policy changes in Great Britain right around the time that this video was put together. So they decided that they wouldn't teach literacy to students who were over 16. They decided that they were not going to focus on core vocabulary. They decided that they would not have a mentor program. So that kind of works its way into the video as well, but I'll go ahead and show this to you. It's kind of interesting.
The language stealers.
What's wrong, Zed?
Nothing's changed. Still no A, A, C.
No reading.
No writing. No talking.
Not for these kids.
Blah blah blah. Blah blah blah.
Only teacher talking here.
Only labels on things here.
Only topic words here. Hi, Michael.
Gladiator, oven, glove, microwave.
Huh?
These words are useless.
What can we do?
I don't know. I've tried everything I know. Core words,
No,
AAC, role model,
no,
communication matters DVD,
no,
how to find words on my talker,
no,
literacy,
no. No core words for you. No role models. No communication DVD. We will not learn to use your talker with you. And we don't teach literacy to over 16s.
You must overcome the language stealers.
Take the nouns down and put up core words.
Learn to match speech sounds to print.
Teach all of your friends.
Don't leave anybody asleep in their wheelchairs.
Language is
Asking, telling,
Directing,
arguing, tattling.
comment choosing, not just naming things. Now we're talking. We can say anything we want with the core words and word parts.
Teach us the codes to match speech sounds to print.
Teach us to decode, segment, blend.
Don't be a language stealer.
Put it in.
Get it out.
Turn it down, up, on, off.
They come here. They make good things. We want to read. We want to.
Okay, so at the very end of that video, we saw where they students were having access to core vocabulary, and that was more of a descriptive teaching approach. And so what you saw was in the cabinet, and you could still label the environment with print, and label clock, label door, label cabinet, but you also want to label the functions. So you would label cabinet, put it in, clock, what time, door, go out or go in, depending on which side of the door you're on. So that's one simple example of using descriptive language to reinforce concepts. The other thing that they did was talking about the gladiators, or the Roman Colosseum, and that Roman lesson, and they come here, they make good things. And so what that video was showing is actually the descriptive teaching method. And descriptive teaching emphasizes the use of core vocabulary, which I know you guys have had some instruction and have learned about core vocabulary. But I also like to include the concept of high frequency vocabulary, because core vocabulary is 350 to 400 words. But everybody, has a broader everyday vocabulary than 350 to 400 words. And so when we're thinking about it, we want to be able to talk about concepts using what I consider to be high frequency or everyday vocabulary. Isabel Beck, we'll see in a slide or two, would consider them to be the words that I'm talking about to be tier 1 words. So the advantages to using core vocabulary, high frequency vocabulary in a descriptive teaching model are that, well, for core, 350 to 400 most commonly used words. So there's a lot that we can say with those words. There's a 90% overlap statistically from preschool through adulthood. So that means that the words that our kiddos learn to use as young children are the same vocabulary words they're going to need through adulthood. So we can equip them early to be successful communicators and build language. And it sounds like you guys have already kind of conquered this challenge here, but prioritizing the use of high frequency vocabulary eliminates that need to program those curriculum words in. So the first place I heard about descriptive teaching was from Gail Van Tatenhove. She is a speech pathologist in Orlando, and I consider her to be the queen of AAC. And she is probably the first person who started teaching about descriptive teaching. And she describes it as a process for teaching and reinforcing the use of high-frequency words in the classroom across the day. So instead of thinking, I have to program more words into this device for every new lesson, for every new theme, we teach the student how to communicate about those ideas and those concepts using the vocabulary that's already in the system, the high-frequency words and the words that are really flexible. And so again, we could talk about Isabel Beck, and she's come out with 3 tiers of vocabulary. Tier 1 are those most basic vocabulary words. And this is where I say we can go beyond core per se, because like the word baby, house, live, grow, they may not be on our core vocabulary list, our 350 words. Beck says that these words rarely require instruction in school. But I want you to think about your students and the fact that they're probably just getting started with the AAC. If you're kind of in that K through 3 age range, grade 3 age range, they're probably just getting started with their AAC systems. So their language is not commensurate with their peers in the classroom. Their language is probably at a lower level. So our students will need some instruction about these words. And so my bent on using descriptive teaching is I'd rather teach you and provide instruction around everyday vocabulary than provide instruction around temporary vocabulary. The second tier for Beck are high frequency words that are for more mature language users, and in school they're found across domains. So they're words that you would find in multiple subjects or in multiple lessons or topics within the same subject area. And then tier 3 are those words that are going to pop up into lessons. You know, for example, if we're thinking on this Native American theme, then it might be artifact or papoose. And there is absolutely no need to add specific lesson-specific words for our early language learners. So I want you to think about where the emphasis lies and think about our typical kids. Our typical speaking kids come into kindergarten having mastered what we would consider to be adult-like language. They have a pretty extensive vocabulary, and their language and their sentence structure is pretty near what it will be as an adult. What they start to learn in kindergarten, their greatest level of language growth in terms of speaking and listening, is vocabulary. But think about our kids who use AAC. They are really behind the 8 ball. They have a lot of them come into school not having been evaluated for an AAC system, and a lot of them even are in school for a couple of years before they get an AAC system. So they have to learn language, and that has to be our first priority. So our goal in terms of our lesson structure and the way we work with kiddos, yes, we want to teach them the content, but we want to use high frequency vocabulary, core words and tier 1 words to talk and teach about these new ideas that they're learning with each lesson. And then we begin to incorporate additional subject-specific vocabulary once our kiddos have a really good grasp on language. So descriptive teaching is something that we want to use to build language. I'm not going to say that we're never going to have kids use a word like photosynthesis or papoose, but at some point, you know, that will come down the road once they've developed language skills. Can you guys see me? I think that you've frozen. We're good? Okay. My video, see, you guys are being so still that I thought the video froze. I thought I'm talking to Cyrus.
Wave our arms, so you know.
Yes, yeah, like turn the lights on. Okay. The other thing that I have this red light and green light here because I want you to think about kind of the red light, green light principle. And that's that new learning, it's harder. That's kind of like a red light task. So you always want to have one red light task at a time. So red light might be the curriculum, green light's going to be the words, right? And so we want to be able to learn new concepts by using the words that we already have so that we're not overlying too many complex cognitive tasks on a student. Okay, so Gail just ties descriptive teaching into a concept called constructivism, and that's where students learn or build knowledge by fitting new information into what they already know. So what does that mean for our kids who use AAC? It means that they can use the high frequency words that are already in their system to communicate about new ideas or concepts. So we want to shift from our instructional language from what we call referential, which is lesson specific, temporary vocabulary, often one-word responses, often a concept label or an object label. And when we're asking those referential type questions, there's often a right answer or a wrong answer, right? So if I said, you know, who were the people that came over on the Mayflower, the correct answer would be pilgrims. So you could either get it right or you could get it wrong. With descriptive teaching, it's a lot more flexible. You're using high frequency vocabulary. You're using vocabulary in a lot of flexible ways. You're focusing on a developmentally appropriate utterance length. So it might be a 1-word response. It might be a 2-word response. It might be a 6-word response because we're really targeting language. And there's more than one correct response because it's open-ended with our students. I want to focus on this word flexible for a second because let's go back to our example of a TP. Which word would you say is going to be more frequently used across the board? TP or house?
House.
House, right? So kind of a silly question. But sometimes we get caught up in which, what we're going to teach. And if my student was a brand new communicator, they just got their AAC system, they just got their Nova Chat this week, house may not be the first word that I would choose as a speech pathologist to teach, but in the context of this lesson of Native American culture and different aspects of that lesson, I would teach house long before I would teach TP because I can use the word house all day long. I'm not going to ever use the word TP once I finish this lesson. The other thing to think about is that core vocabulary, high frequency vocabulary, is used across the day. So think about the word place. How would you use the word place in social studies?
Habitat. Well,
Habitat, okay. Or location, right? How would you use the word place in math?
yeah, tens and ones.
Yeah, your ones place, your tens place, right? So you want to teach vocabulary that's flexible, that you could get a lot of mileage out, but it also broadens students' learning because they're learning the flexibility of the words as well. I'm going to show you a video. This is Gail Van Tatenhove, and she is using some descriptive teaching. Gail works with a lot of adults, and so she is talking to them about emergency preparedness. Down in Florida, they have a program, or I'm not sure of what it is, but a policy where they have to teach about emergency preparedness on a regular basis because of the hurricanes that come through. So here's, it's probably gonna switch over to the internet and we'll grab this video.
First thing that I think we have to think about in an emergency is a bad thing. Yeah. Generally, emergencies are bad things, not good things.
Bad thing.
All right, so the first thing we have to know about emergency is usually they are bad things. Second thing about emergencies is that they do not happen every day. Hopefully.
Okay, I love how she adds that hopefully at the end. Okay, let's go through back to here. So what we saw with Gail's video is that she was focusing on modeling the concepts using everyday words. And now she's going to ask a question. And the reason I say ask a different question is because she's going to ask an open-ended question, or she's going to give a couple of options. But listen to her question.
What's the second thing we know about an emergency?
Bad things do not happen every day.
All right, they're bad things, and they do not happen every day. Hurricanes. Which group would they fall into? We know they're coming, or we do not know they're coming? Mr. Cole? Don't tell me which I is.
We know.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. Let me just get rid of that. Come back here. Okay, so she asked open-ended questions. She could have said, what kind of storm comes with wind and rain and is very dangerous, and they would have had to say hurricane. But she said, Or she could have talked about what do we call something that's bad that doesn't happen every day, and they could have said emergency, but instead she said, what's an emergency? So she uses the content word and lets her students or her clients use the everyday vocabulary to talk about it. You will find that using descriptive teaching also gives you a sense of what your student is learning, more so than if they're just giving labels back to you. So if, for example, they had emergency programmed in and hurricane programmed, etc., then, basically have a 50-50, or, you have a chance of getting it right, a chance of getting it wrong. But if I ask you to tell me about a concept, I have a really strong sense of what you're learning based on what you tell me. So if we go back to our Native Americans, I can say, tell me something you know about Native Americans. So what is something you know about Native Americans? Anybody?
They were here first.
Exactly. They were here first, right? They helped us when we came here. How about if we said, what is a teepee?
It's a home.
It's a home? Good. Good. Okay. And so what I want you to think about is that if you have a student who's at a 1 to 2 word language level, and you could say, and they said a house, or they said where live, or they said they live, or they say live in, then those are all really great answers. And we would be modeling that language using aided language stimulation during the lesson. And then when they give that back to us, we'll see that they're learning. If my student is able to put together a simple sentence, then that's the type of response I would expect. And so that's when we go back to that slide where I showed typically a 1-word response can be a multiple word response. If I ask, what is a teepee, and a student has a greater degree of language, I might want them to say, it's a kind of house, or it is what they lived in. I would want the response to be commensurate or equal to what their language level is. Here's another question. What did Native Americans use a bow and arrow for? Food. Perfect, right? What if I had a student who could give me a longer sentence? What could we say?
To get food.
To get food, or how they got food, right? Okay, great. So with descriptive teaching, students provide a definition or a description of a concept, and it helps them to learn to use their permanent or everyday words in flexible ways, and it gives you the ability as their support system to focus on learning language all day long. So we're going to go ahead and do this lesson, quote unquote, planting, from a referential approach using fringe vocabulary. And I'm just going to walk through this, and then I'm going to have you guys break into groups and do another one. But let's say that we're planting, and I have a communication board with the words pot and soil and seeds and water. And then I might say, what do I put in first? And then you guys would all point to probably dirt, right? We probably put dirt in first. What do we do next? Seeds. And what do we put on last? Water, right? And so I have seen many group activities where that's been kind of how it goes. The topic board is there, and the teacher will direct the activity by having the students talk about the things or the what's of the activity. And so what can we get to with that? We can label, and we can respond to questions. But what if we use different words? What if we used everyday words, right? And I'm talking about the pot, and I hold up 2 pots, and the student has to tell me big or little. Which one should we use? Student says big, or student says little? And then what if I hold up the dirt and say, what am I going to do with this? At a 1-word level, they might say put, they might say in. But if I don't put in enough, maybe I just put in 1 little scoop because I'm waiting for them to tell me more. When I get to the top, I'm going to want them to tell me stop, right? Stop putting the soil in. I might hold up the seed and say, what do I do with this? And they'll either tell me in or on or put. And then I might encourage them to say we have to push it down, right? So have them tell me down. And then hold up the watering can, and what about this? What am I going to do with this? And so you can see that in the context of that lesson, there were several more steps. and there was a greater degree of vocabulary usage, but the vocabulary being used was higher frequency. The thing is that we can also expand for our students who can say 2 words. We might hold up the big and little pot and they have to say want big or get little. I hold up the dirt and they say put in or more in or put more in, right? What do we do with the seed? We have to put down or push down or put in. We could get to the top of the thing and they could say no more or stop to put the soil in. And then what do we do with the water? We put on. Okay, I would even emphasize put over pour when it goes to water, because put is a really high frequency word. Put makes the core list and pour does not. Okay, so let's do a 3-word activity, right? We could say want big one or get little one. Dirt, soil, put in more. The seed, push it down or put it under. Put water on. And so you can see how, regardless of where the student's language level is, you could be tapping into the student's language at their level. And the communicative functions are expanded at that point because we've gone beyond labeling and answering questions to responding to questions. You're directing the activity. You're negating by saying no more or stop. And, you know, what if we were going to comment during this activity? What are some words that we could use to comment? Any thoughts?
Good job.
Good job. Great. Could say, I like it, I don't like it, that's dirty, right? Okay, or if they're feeling dirty, we could say it's cold, it's dirty, it's wet. All right, so what I'd like you to do is take about 10 minutes at your tables, and I'd like you to develop a cooking activity. You can choose what you're going to make. For, like if you had pulled kids into a small group in a pull-out situation, and I'd like you to build a cooking activity using a descriptive approach. So if you're going to make pudding or brownies, what types of utterances would you target from your students? I'll give you about 10 minutes.
So we show them. Touch it.
over there. Like if you were talking about more there.
Okay. Do you need more time, or or have you had enough time to do that activity?
We need a few more minutes.
2 more minutes? Okay, perfect. I wasn't sure if 10 minutes was too much, so we'll stick to that.
Good. Which is weird because it's like I like using like right. Turns, yeah. Oh, really? So, yeah, there's little lights there. Where do you?
I wasn't gonna.
You didn't want to open it?
Oh, yes, yeah. What's up? Okay, why don't we take about 1 more minute, and then we'll go over it.
Oh, that could have been bad. That would have been so sad. I would have been very sad by that. I would have been stuck in a couple chairs. Really hard. And in the classroom, things go so fast. It's like, and they're very possessive.
Okay, I'm going to have you guys wrap up.
I think we're good. Yep.
Good. Okay. How did you find that activity? Challenging, easy, fun?
All of the above.
All of the above? Does anybody want to share? Does any one group want to share with everybody what your cooking activity was and some of the language that you would use or some of the words you'd focus on?
I'll share.
Great.
So we did pizza.
Yum.
Did you guys do pizza too? Yeah. So we did
cheese.
Just cheese. Very good. Pass that. So we had all the ingredients set up in our mind.
Okay. Great.
The dough, push down, put down, make circle or circle.
Good.
Talk about the color, white. Sauces, we would do open it, turn it, over, put on, push, move it, put more, no more, stop, all done. And then with cheese, we did pick up, put under, put over, like having them choose. So does it go under the pizza, over the pizza?
Great.
Put there, and then eat it, like it, not like it.
Awesome. Very good. Good. Did anybody choose to make anything besides pizza? Did everybody make pizza?
We did root beer floats.
Oh, yum. I like dessert after pizza. Okay.
I think she wanted you guys to share what you
Okay. So we started with the cup, so we kind of went with your pot, like big cup, small cup, get cup, go get cup.
Great.
And then with the ice cream, we did put in cup, spoon in. And then with the root beer, we did pour in, pour on top, put on top. I guess you could do the stop, all done.
Yeah.
Or also there too.
Great. Awesome. You guys did a great job. And the really great thing about using a language focus instead of having an activity board for making pizza or making a root beer float is you could take those words that you were using to make pizza and you can walk over to the root beer float table and probably use most of those words in that same situation. And then tomorrow when you're making brownies or you're making something else, you can use those same vocabulary words, right? Get big, get little. Make big, make little. Pour in, get, take out. So all of those words that we use in one cooking activity are applicable to many different activities. So let's take a look at a science lesson. We're going to take a look at marine habitats. You guys, when we were talking about place, somebody used the word habitat. So let's take a look at what is a habitat, right? And so habitat would be the key word or the curriculum word, but how would we describe that? And these symbols are just part of the Unity software in a PRC device. It probably looks similar to what you have on your LAMP Words for Life app that you use. And so a habitat is where a thing lives. So if I were able to put a 4-word sentence together, I would say where a thing lives. What if I could only put 2 words together? How might I describe a habitat?
Where lives.
Where lives. Good. Or animal lives. Exactly. Great job. A species is a kind of animal or living thing. But again, if I could only say 2 or 3 words, I might say kind animal, kind of thing, organism, any living thing. So see how we're able to describe these kind of harder words with really easy, simple words. A water organism, I could simplify that to something lives in water. I could change it to an animal that lives in water. There's a lot of flexibility with how I would answer this. Endangered species, not many might die off, right? would be one way to describe an endangered species. Now I'm going to have you guys think about how you would define or describe, if we were going to expand this little booklet on marine habitats and marine science, how would you define the word adapt?
Are you just asking us, or are we supposed to?
Yeah, I'm asking you. Yeah.
Change.
Change, right? Good. And if we wanted to get a little bit more in depth, if we had a student who could give us a longer utterance, we might say change to live, right? Because you have to change something in order to adapt to your environment. So you might say change to live. What is a predator? Eat you. Yes, very good. I hope not me. So give me that's a great response. What is a longer, maybe a 4, 5, 6 word answer to just defining or describing a predator?
Animal eats other animals. Yeah.
Animal that eats other animals. Exactly, exactly. Okay, great. So let's piggyback on predator and define or describe prey.
Animal gets eaten.
Animal gets eaten, right? Exactly. And then survival,
Too
right?
slow.
Or even just slowest, right? Kind of like that joke where I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun you. So survival, how would we describe or define survival?
Live best.
Live, exactly. So stay alive, keep alive, right? Keep living. Good, nice job. Okay, so what we are doing here is we're asking this open-ended question. We're asking a WH question. What does it mean to adapt? What is a predator? How would you describe the word survival? We also can develop descriptive teaching or use descriptive teaching to ask a student to share about a concept. And so we can use these talk-about strategies, both pre and post-instruction, to get a greater insight into what our students know. And so graphic organizers are a great way to talk about a concept. So we were just looking at marine biology. What are some things, I'm going to go out into edit mode here for a second so I can add a text box. What are some things that we know about the ocean?
Big, salt water.
Big. Good. It's salt water. Let's add that in. Okay, what else? Wet. Good. What else?
Deep.
Blue. It's deep. And I think I heard blue. I added that. Deep. What else? Anything else we know?
Fish live there.
Fish. Good. I was thinking that same thing. Fish live there. Okay. Anything else?
Swim.
Swim. Good. One more. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Cold.
Cold. Yeah, great. All right. So here are lots of descriptive terms that we know about ocean, right? You can swim in it. There are a lot of fish there. It's deep, it's blue, it's wet, it has salt water, it's big, and we can even maybe say it's biggest, right? Another thing that we can do is we can do a compare and contrast activity and talk about what's the same and what's different about two concepts. So if we wanted to compare and contrast oceans, we might say, let me get a text box here.
Bigger, biggest.
Biggest, right? Good. We could say about a river that maybe that they're long, right?
Yeah.
So we would say long. Okay, what else would we say that might be different between the two?
Ocean, salt water, rivers, fresh water.
Exactly, good. Whoop. Having trouble here. I'm just going to do this. Fresh water, okay. This one is salt water. Okay, anything else?
Deep for the ocean.
Deep. Okay, well, we'll say deeper. And shallower. Okay, What else?
Not deep.
Yeah.
No, they could
Not deep. Oh, yeah, thank you. Not deep. Okay. What is the same about an ocean and a river?
It's water.
Water, right?
Fish. Fish live in both. Yeah.
Yes, good. Water, fish live. Anything else?
Swim, you just said, right? Yeah.
Swim, great. All right, great. So again, we're using a lot of really high frequency vocabulary, but we're thinking a lot through the concept that we're working on, which in this case is oceans and rivers and how they're alike and how they're different. Let's go ahead and take a look. I think you guys have a copy of this. And so we'll do this one together. Actually, I'm going to come back out here. We'll do this one together. How would we define, if we're working on states of matter, how would we define a solid?
Yeah. A solid. Hard.
Hard. Okay. What else? I'll tell you, only because I've been thinking about solids for a couple days and you've been thinking about it for a couple seconds. They have a shape, right? So the definition of a solid is it has a shape. And some of the characteristics of a solid would be A, that it's hard, right? What's another characteristic of a solid?
Did you just ask about more characteristics?
Yes.
You can see them.
You can see them, okay.
Hold it.
You can hold it, good. That's great. Another thing is that when you compare a solid or a solid to a liquid or a gas, it does not move by itself, right? There's no movement on its own. Okay. So then what are some examples of a solid?
Desk.
Did you say desk?
Yes. Yeah.
Chair, good. Book. Classic example is ice, right? For our solid, liquid, gas. What are some non-examples of solids?
Water.
Water, good. Air.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Gas. Good. How about juice? All right, great. So this is called a Freyer model. And the great thing about it is it helps you to look at a concept or an idea from different perspectives. So giving the definition of it, talking about the characteristics, looking at what does fit into that class or that description and what doesn't. So what I'd like you to do is take about 5 minutes. I want you to pick a word from a recent lesson or a recent activity that happened in Gen Ed. And I want you to go ahead and go through the process of defining it, giving some characteristics, and thinking of some examples and non-examples.
So it's something.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I thought.
Maybe. Yeah. And then the characteristics would be.
Okay.
Has live babies. examples. So, cow. But again, it's not what they
But I guess I wonder, like, with this, I feel like it's not like, oh, yes,
Okay, gotcha. Okay, kids, so I'm like, how would you? Yeah, yeah, gotcha. Because the idea is and instead of having a program. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, how did we do? Are you guys, did you guys finish up?
Yes.
Perfect. How did you find that task?
A little more challenging.
It is a little more challenging, isn't it? What were some of the concepts that you wrote in your circle?
Ours was mammal.
Mammal. Okay, good. And tell me about what you wrote for your definition and your characteristics.
For definition, we just said kind of animal.
Okay.
For characteristics, warm blood, feed babies milk, have a backbone. Spine seemed a little bit much.
Yeah.
Have babies, have live babies, have babies.
Okay, good. Good. And then what were you, give me one example and one non-example.
A cow would be an example. A non-example would be a snake or a fish.
Okay, awesome. Good. Does anybody else want to share their content word and how they did the graphic organizer?
St. Patrick's Day.
St. Patrick's Day. Okay.
Definition.
Definition. Party for Irish.
Green party. Yes. Okay.
Characteristics: wear green, fun, clover, luck, money. Examples: leprechaun, clover, wear green hat. Okay, this is where we actually had a question.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you've run into circumstances where it's very confusing to have the non-examples paired with all of the rest of this stuff.
So just to make sure I heard your question right, you're wondering if it's challenging, if it's confusing to come up with non-examples?
For the students, yeah.
For the student, that really would depend on the student. And so a lot of times when you're teaching a concept, if the student has a more basic understanding, it might be confusing to introduce those not, that negative. But if your student understands, kind of like the quality or concept of an opposite, or your student understands things that are not included, can kind of sort out what belongs and what doesn't belong, then they should be okay with it.
I think for a lot of our students, we would at least want to put not in front of
like not Christmas.
Yeah.
Not Christmas,
Well, and that's a really good way, you know, something actually I learned recently is when you're talking about opposites, that rather than teach, let's say, hot, cold, you might teach cold, not cold first, right? And so we talk about what's cold and what's not cold, and then we can assign a label to that after we've talked about something that's not cold, that it's hot. Okay, great idea. So I wanted to give you guys a couple of resources to take a look at, and this is in your handout. One is just a kid's dictionary, and wonder how many of those things it took me to. Let me go here. Oh, I can't go there. Hold on one second. Let me go to KidSmith. And Wordsmith is an online dictionary resource, but this KidSmith gives you really basic definitions. So if I looked up mammal here, let's see what it would give me. A warm blood animal with fur or hair and skeleton or bones inside its body, right? Makes milk to feed babies. Good. Okay, so that's pretty much what you had said it was. Let's look up habitat here. Habitat, natural environment of animal or plant. So it gives you kind of a jumping off point. So I would think that natural environment actually is a little bit heavy in terms of vocabulary. So I would come up with a way, I would say place an animal lives or place where find a plant. Something like that that's a little easier. Another resource is, if I could flip back here for a second, this Splasho.com Upgoer 5. It's just really kind of a fun, quirky little site. And it's talks about, can you explain a hard activity, a hard idea using only the 1,000 most used words? And they say 1,000 up here because actually 10 made the list of frequency and 100 made the list for frequency, but 1,000 did not. So it's a really kind of fun way just to wrap your head around providing these descriptions for your students. So let's say, you know, Gail described emergency as a bad thing that does not happen every day. So she was able to generate a description of an emergency that was not flagged. She did a good job. What if I added the word hurricane? Oops. Hurricane in here. So then it would say, uh-oh, you used a word that was not permitted. So this is just kind of a fun little resource. One of the words that we always give in the context of the seminar when we're teaching about this is photosynthesis. And I always kind of joke that I never say photosynthesis except for once a month on Thursday morning when I teach about this. But photosynthesis, obviously, if I type that in here, I'm going to get flagged. You guys remember science enough to know what photosynthesis is?
Plant makes food.
Exactly, plant makes food. What does it make food from?
Light.
Yes. And I'm doing this on purpose. Look what got flagged. Plant got flagged. So I always advocate for, do we have to in this description use the word plant if we're in the context of a science lesson where we're talking about plants? Would it be okay to say it makes food from light? Or would it be okay to say how they make food from light when we know that we're talking about plants? So you can give yourself permission to leave out that curriculum word of plant because you're going to be referring to it in your description. Does that make sense? The other resource that I want to show you is the minspeak.com website. And let me go back exactly to where, so I can show you the pathway of getting there. minspeak.com. And this website is sponsored by Semantic Compaction Systems. It's the company that I consult with, but it's also put together by Gail Van Tatenhove. If you scroll down to the bottom, there's this little window here for teaching materials, teaching plans and materials. And if you click on that, and you go to Teaching Materials Exchange, I have to show you my holiday book on St. Patrick's Day first. Let's go to March. So on this page are holidays. And the holidays are all described using core vocabulary, right? So St. Patrick's Day talks about who was he, right? So what would the child be responsible for? Who was he? And then the adult could say the context. Where did he live? He lived in Ireland. Ireland is a fringe word, right? That would be the adult. An island that is really green. What did he do? And what do we do? And that's where our kiddos can get involved, you know, and make simple sentences. We eat green food. We drink green drinks. We wear green clothes. This picture cracked me up when I found it. We make green things. We ask for a kiss. The end. And all of the resources that are on the MinSpeak website have kind of like the pathway to the vocabulary for each word in the system. So if you have somebody who's using an accent or using a Pixon board, that's helpful. You also have, you know, all of these different resources, and they're all focused on core vocabulary again. So Columbus Day, picking apples, Thanksgiving dinner, saying thank you on Thanksgiving. What I really wanted to show you were the curriculum supports. And so what Gail has done, sort of in the spirit of descriptive teaching, has come up with about 20 resources, a lot on science, a couple on social studies, so that you can look at how to use a descriptive teaching approach. And I'm going to go to the planets real quick. And obviously this 20 resources is not an exhaustive list, but it helps you to wrap your head around how to do this. So here are some instructions, and she talks about whether you should add non-core vocabulary. My thing is I don't add non-core vocabulary until my student has really solid language skills and we're ready to expand vocabulary. Okay, so our solar system has a sun and 8 planets. It has many moons and stars. The planets revolve around the sun. Each planet orbits around the sun. Revolve means go around another thing. If I had more simple language, I might say go around. If I had more expansive language, I say one thing goes around another. Orbit is the way around, or the way one thing goes around another. They rotate as they go around the sun. Whoop. Rotate equals turn around, or I might say turn around on itself, or turn around itself, or go around itself, because rotate is that internal kind of around your own axis movement. Okay, and then the whole rest of this particular booklet that Gail developed is about superlatives. So the sun is nearest, superlatives and comparatives, and it's bigger than the rest of the planets. What do we know about Mercury? It's first, it's the first planet in order, and it's the nearest, smallest, and hottest. If we scroll down to Earth, we'd see that it's third, and it's where we live. And it has more water than land. It's a very wet place. And so she's just using very simple language to engage in this teaching process about the planets. So those are some resources that you can use. The dictionary helps you to kind of simplify. From the 2 examples that I pulled out, you see you have to simplify a little bit further sometimes. On the minspeak.com for some resources just to kind of practice, and the splasho.com to practice. We're going to shift gears for a minute, until the end, and take a look at Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom's taxonomy is just basically something that guides instruction, especially since Common Core State Standards came out. Does Colorado participate with Common Core?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So part of how Common Core State Standards were developed was they looked at Bloom's taxonomy and then tapped into the different ways of demonstrating learning. And so just all you need to know from this slide is that there are skills that build upon previous skills of remembering, then understanding, then applying, analyzing, creating, evaluating, and creating. And so it can be kind of thought as intellectual goals for learning for our students. And each tier builds on the skills in the previous level, and it assumes mastery of the previous skills. So to apply something, the taxonomy, that's the 3rd level, assumes that you understand it. And to analyze something assumes that you know how to apply it. So when teachers are working to align educational objectives to state and national standards, Bloom's taxonomy is really helpful in identifying the lesson's purpose and setting some goals for the student. But think about our kids who use AAC. And if we can help them through descriptive teaching and providing them with, you know, the aided language input and the modeling that you guys have already learned about within the context of the curriculum, can we build their academic skills, their cognitive skills, and help them to move from just being present in the classroom and participating by hitting a button that says Christopher Columbus to a level of building language and competing for grades? So we're going to take a look at, now I have to be honest with you, I did have a different lesson in here. I had Hatchet, but given the feedback from Christina that you guys work with younger kids, I put together a lesson on Charlotte's Web, which I have not read in years. So we'll go through this together, but hopefully it'll be okay. So if your classroom, your student's classroom were doing Charlotte's Web, reading Charlotte's Web, there would be a lot of different activities that would be built around Charlotte's Web. So each one of the activities would, by nature, fit into some aspect of Bloom's taxonomy. And it would, which would address their learning and their cognition. So it might be worksheets, it might be some kind of art project, it might be a short answer or a writing assignment. So let's take a look at the first level. Remembering refers to the student's ability to recall what they've learned. And so it's defining, it's recalling, it's repeating, it's reproducing, it's listing. And so we started talking in our seminars about Bloom's taxonomy when we had a doctoral student who attended, and he challenged us and said that we could not even get past the first level of Bloom's taxonomy if we only focused on descriptive teaching and high frequency vocabulary. And so I took that challenge and I said, wow, I wonder if that's true. And I looked at listing and I got really stuck because I thought, wow, if we don't add all the parts of a plant into the device, then how can our student make a list of all the parts of a plant? Or if I don't add all the planets into the device, then how can my student make a list of the planets? And so I want you guys to think about for a minute how our students can create a list without us putting all of that vocabulary into their device.
Yeah, they could describe what it looks like.
You could talk about it, right? You could do a talk about, describe what it looks like. Good. Another thing that you could do is you could have a list of items. For example, you could have a list of the planets, but also on that list would be maybe the names of the oceans or, you know, some distractor items. And the student would have to say, yes, it goes on the list, circle it. Or no, that doesn't go on the list, cross it out. Or you could have your list basically made on index cards. And the student would have to sort the cards into what could go on the list and what doesn't go on the list. And so there are a lot of ways to tackle that skill of listing, right, without actually having to program the vocabulary into the device. Okay, let's take a look at Charlotte's Web. So one of the tasks was to define. So if we were talking about Wilbur and he's a runt, we might have to define as part of our vocabulary task what a runt is. So what is a runt?
The smallest.
Smallest, right? Good. Or smallest one. Or if we had, you know, again, I'm always wanting you to look at just the different language levels. And I don't know your students, but, you know, if your student had a greater command of language, you might say the smallest one of all, or the smallest one that came, something like that. So in the beginning, Fern is religiously strict with the schedule, the feeding schedule. And so it says literally she fed him 4 times a day religiously. So religiously in that context is not how we would typically think about that. Even, you know, our little 3rd graders would not think of religiously in that context. So we would have to define that word. How would we define that word?
Schedule.
Not change.
Not change. Kept doing it, right? Didn't miss. so that she just did it. And, you know, schedule actually might be a little bit of a higher level word that might not be in the device, but you could think of some other ways to do that. Okay. So let's move on to the next level, which is understanding. And that refers to the student's ability to talk about or explain what they've learned. So that might be something like paraphrasing. And if you think about or describing, that's what we've been talking about all afternoon, is describing this concept or paraphrasing this concept. So let's see. Guess what? Oh, I thought I didn't have anything there. So what happens in chapter 2, Wilbur is quite bored. And so he's inside, on the inside of his enclosure, his pen. He said, there's nothing to do when I'm in but go out. And there's nothing to do when I'm out but go in. And then Gander the goose tells him that there's a broken board and that he could escape from his pen. And so, have you guys read Charlotte's Web? Years ago. Okay. So I'm probably a little bit fresher than you are. But what happens when Wilbur escapes from his pen would be an understanding type question. And so what happens is he doesn't know what to do. So he runs and he plays, and then he gets caught. How did he feel when he was being chased? Imagine how he might have felt, and what are some feeling words that we might use?
Scared.
Scared. That's exactly how he felt when Lurvy, I think, is the farmhand, and Lurvy was chasing him, and he felt scared. But then he got lured in by some food. So, okay. Applying just refers to the student's ability to use the information in a new way. So, it's things like dramatizing, interpreting, writing about, illustrating, demonstrating. So, what's an example? Charlotte wrote words in her web. What is a word that you would have written in your web if you were Charlotte? How would you have kind of helped Wilbur? Some of the words that she put in were some pig, terrific, radiant. Anybody have an everyday word that they might put in the web? Happy. Okay, good. Happy or helpful. Okay, good. Analyzing refers to the student's ability to differentiate between different components. And that is things like when we have to do that compare and contrast, or we have to differentiate or ask questions about a concept. So we could compare and contrast the kind of friend that Charlotte was compared to Templeton, right? So, what kind of a friend was Charlotte? Do you guys remember?
She was a good friend. She was a nice friend.
She was a nice friend, right? She was helpful. She wanted to help. She was kind. And then we could say, how is that different from the kind of friend that Templeton was? Charlotte cared about other people. Templeton cared about himself, right? So we could say she cared about others. He cared about himself. He wanted to help. He wanted to eat, right? He helped Wilbur so that he could get Wilbur's food. That was his motivation. So you could say Charlotte was a real friend. Templeton was not a real friend. So there's a lot of ways you could go with that. Evaluating refers to the student's ability to justify a position or a decision. So at some point, Charlotte needs a new word, and she sends Templeton out to find a new word to describe Wilbur, and he comes back with the word crunchy. So evaluating might be, why didn't Charlotte want to weave the word crunchy into her web? Any thoughts? Wilbur was actually trying to avoid being eaten. And so to put the word crunchy in the web might have thought, maybe we do want to eat him. So that's why Charlotte rejected it. So evaluating, that might be a task for evaluating. And then creating is just making a new product or having a new perspective. So a task might be, what special talent would you give to one of the other animals on the farm, like Templeton or the goose, to help Wilbur? So it could be, if I were the cow, you know, maybe I could hide him, right? That wouldn't necessarily be a special talent, but thinking of other ways to be helpful and keep Wilbur alive would be that task. So what I want you to do now is, have you all printed this paper?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I want you to take a book that you've worked with with your students, and as a group, I want you to go through this, developing this lesson. For each level of blooms, for the first level, take one of these bulleted points. Identify a problem, state the main idea, take one of the points, and then I want you to give an answer related to your book that uses only high-frequency vocabulary. So I'm going to give you about 15 or 20 minutes to work through that. As a group, you'll pick a bulleted point under each of the 6 levels of blooms and then write an answer that aligns with your topic or your book and uses high-frequency vocabulary.
Deb, do you want us to work as one big group or still several small groups?
I would work as several small groups.
She said choose a book. Select a book or a topic that you've worked with before. Okay.
So if you want, I'll pull up that splasho.com website. And if you guys want to pull that up, that can be a way for you to test your responses to see if it fits. We'll say that if you don't get flagged, then your response works. So let me pull that back up. So you can see the website address up here.
Oh, yes.
Two girls.
Yeah.
And she ended up not being there.
He's at Saxon. Yeah. Wait a time. You don't have any reach that you read. Anyway, we're Dewberry. So that would be systematize the main is caterpillar, right? Yeah, caterpillar hungry. Yeah. Yeah. Main events. So
That would be the list.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. So they could list the things.
Yeah, they could still list it, but we wouldn't necessarily teach them.
Yeah.
In that way.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, but you could do a list of like, did it cheeseburger? To her, identify. Yes, you don't necessarily have to. Yeah, but what happened at the beginning? Well, what happened?
Yeah, I think that's actually, because it's just
yeah, this is sort of the main idea. Yes. Yeah. Okay, understand.
Not right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, understand.
But applying what can you do to see your friend? That's why it's
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's hard. You know, something like this part of the but they all know what it means. I mean, that's just
Literally
so that's
where I came and visit you. Actually.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because once again,
trying to be the same.
I know, that's kind of
Right.
It makes you laugh, think, feel sad. I mean, we could go with that. That we need food to yeah. So she said, explain how a section there was nothing sad about it. It was just what it made us think about. Explain how restaurant. So I don't even know. Because there's nothing so sad in a story. We don't have to. You know, why would you want to I like to wait. Are you doing just crazy? But I don't know how would you make different characters.
But you guys produce like
strong and weak traits.
Oh, could not have happened.
Well, maybe a strong trait.
It's fine.
Yeah. So illustrations. It's in the corner.
Okay, we're going to take about 3 more minutes, guys, and then we're going to go over it.
Yeah. It's just it's telling us. Yes, above me. Feel like I could go a little road. I feel like I'm getting ready. When you get down to negotiating albums, okay, so the first a lot of the other sections,
Yeah.
like you know, analyze them a lot.
Yes.
It's a part of it. It's just. And then we can categorize it by brand. Which one?
Yeah, the one has like, can you put one? Yeah. Okay.
Exit on that.
And then put it, you know, the last one.
And then you just
Scratch it and give it to each. I'm like,
Is this separate? No, not that one.
Oh.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a separate sheet.
okay, okay. What was this on before? Rita Moore? No.
Okay, let's wrap up. And who would like to share what your group has done?
Who wants to share?
Anybody want to share? I can only see one table, so I might have to call on the one that I'm looking right at, which is the girl who just waved her arms. So what book did you guys choose?
We did Llama Red Pajama.
Oh, perfect. Okay. And so what was your remembering task?
I'm so sorry, what?
What task did you choose for remembering? Let's go up here to, which one of these did you choose?
Oh, we did all of those. We attempted to accomplish all of them. We did the main idea, it gave 3 details to start. So we said, like, the main idea is baby sad. So, baby is sad in the whole book.
Oh, is he bad in the whole book?
He's sad.
Okay. And then 3 details.
We did really short ones. We did want mom.
Okay.
And no sleep.
Great. Awesome. Okay. So for understanding, which task did you choose? Okay. So choose one to talk about.
So understanding, I guess we did like select and describe. Oh wait, no. A photo or illustration.
Okay.
There's a picture where he's in his red pajamas in bed. So we said, baby in bed, no sleep, dark, want mom, wear sleep clothes.
Very good. Wear sleep clothes. Nice. Okay. Applying.
So we set, or like we changed one of it in the reading, how it would affect the reading. So at the end, the mom comes. So we changed it to, if we said, mom, no come, baby, more sad.
Oh, very good. Okay, good.
Book.
Analyzing.
For analyzing, that was a little harder because of the book we chose, but
okay.
And a different, well, it's similar. Yeah, so how a section made us feel, we said, baby sad, feel sad for baby too.
Okay, good, good. Evaluating.
So strong and weak traits of the main character, we said sad, still need mom, and then we kind of switched to mom traits, and we said mom do too many things because she's like too busy.
Okay, good.
And then we did.
I like that description.
This is where we
Okay.
are.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We didn't get to creating because we did.
Okay. Well, you guys did a lot because you did all of them. Does anybody else want to share?
I'll share ours.
Okay.
We didn't keep the new shoes book.
Okay.
And so we try to think about some of our lowest level students.
Okay.
And actually a similar level. So we thought about each one as what we would ask them and then what their response might be.
Perfect.
For the first one, we would say, what cat doing, or what is the cat doing? And they might say, cat can't do shoes.
Okay, good.
For the second one, we said, where cat, or where is the cat? And they would say, go to school.
Good. Okay, great.
For the third one, we thought either what other color shoes, because they change shoes and they could pick a color. Or,
Okay.
say they picked purple, why turn purple? So they would apply maybe step in juice.
Yes. Good.
For analyzing, we thought either do you like shoes, they could say like, not like, clean or dirty, or not clean instead of dirty.
Okay.
For evaluating, we said who is cat, so they could, or who is Pete, so they could describe cat, black,
Okay.
small, big, lots of different things. And then for creating, we just said draw Pete, because they would need a lot of modeling or help developing anything bigger than that, so kind of drawing their interpretation.
Right. Right. Okay. Great. Thank you guys for sharing. And I hope you found that activity to be helpful. What I really wanted you to gain from that activity is that we can go beyond providing descriptive definitions as part of descriptive teaching to using high frequency vocabulary to really tap into a lot of different type of learning tasks. And again, I just want to reiterate before I wrap up how important it is to really focus on language learning and equipping our kids to develop language, develop what we call SNUG, which is spontaneous novel utterance generation. And the way that we can do that in school is to be able to be modeling language and eliciting language all day long. And so by using descriptive teaching, we really have that opportunity throughout the day to be teaching new words, teaching those permanent, everyday, high-frequency words in a lot of different contexts. It's really helpful for our early language learners. That's not where we stop. Once our kids have a really great command of language, we can then just like our typically developing kiddos, we want to work on expanding vocabulary. But for our early language learners, descriptive teaching and focusing on high frequency vocabulary is just so valuable to them. We have a couple minutes left. Does anybody have any questions? Well, I appreciate your time today, and I hope that this was helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It really was.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dad.
Thanks. Have a great evening, everyone.
You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Oh, one thing I thought of when she was going through like Charlotte's Web and stuff, where she had the picture of the pen, the big pen. That's an awesome time to like pull an iPad in class or go up to one of the computers in class and pull up a visual to help you guys out. So most of the classes have iPads now. I think we could probably be using them more to like help relate the information that the teacher is talking about to something they can actually relate to. I don't know, just a thought.